Welcome to r/malicious compliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter but not the spirit of a request. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story. My clients came to the store demanding that I be listed as their consultant. The second story. Guy did not want to receive work letters to email outside of working hours, and then complained that he did not receive the letter. The third story. Because my facility rejected our request to reduce the number of roll calls each day, my colleague decides to skip all of them when he has the vacation time. On to the first story. Want me to make my quota? Hope you like cross-dressers. Once upon a time, in order to make ends meet during uni, I took a job working at a bridal shop. This shop involved mostly walk-ins who would buy dresses directly off the rack. If you're from the States, you probably know the one I'm talking about. When I took the job, it was explained to me that the majority of my salary was commission-based. That didn't bother me because even the base pay was decent at the time. Besides, the lowest financial band to qualify for commission required me to sell 10 dresses a week. Easy. During my initial interview, I explained to my manager that I would need to get off work at 3 p.m. on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays to attend all my classes. Now, if you've ever worked at a retail job at all, you know the daytime hours Monday through Thursday, as well as those evening hours, tend to be very low volume. The majority of all sales are made Friday through Sunday, with the casual shoppers coming in on Saturday and the serious shoppers coming in on Sunday. Therefore, my manager had no problem with my needing those nights off every week. My schedule was set as Wednesday, Thursday, Friday during the day, as well as all day Saturday and Sunday. However, within 2 weeks of being there, it became apparent that one of the older women I worked with did have a problem with my schedule. She disliked working the weekday evenings and days because those hours didn't typically result in sales. Instead, most of our time was spent cleaning and restocking inventory. At first, it started as a few nasty comments here and there on the floor. Then she started borrowing items from my bridal drawer: belly bumps, pins, hair ties, tissues, cough drops. Eventually, she started telling the hostess to remove my name from the incoming bridal inventory, claiming I was busy with another client when I was not. The final straw came when she had to work one of my daytime shifts. I was studying for an exam, and one of my high-dollar brides came in. Instead of ringing the sale through with my name as the consultant, as per policy, the computer automatically registers who is the consultant. She removed my name and put her name as the consultant instead. That one sale was over $200 in commission. I was livid. Of course, I brought it up to my manager, and that did not go as planned. Because the other consultant had more seniority than I did, my manager flipped the tables on me and claimed that maybe if I pulled my weight and pushed through more in sales, I wouldn't be in this position. Apparently, my refusal to take evening shifts during the week was upsetting to other consultants because they had to work those low-volume hours. WTF? I was working all the daytime shifts. Manager started badgering me that I needed to find a way to pull in more business for the bridal shop and close more sales, or she would demote me to a stockroom employee. Okay, want me to bring in more business? Game on. Now, I knew from previous interactions in the shop that both my manager and this consultant took moral issue with anyone associated with the Alphabet Mafia. For instance, we had a couple come in once looking for 2 wedding gowns, and the manager made them so uncomfortable with her religious talk that both brides left. I, however, didn't give a D what you were doing with your merchandise after you purchased it, and I had a lot of friends in the Alphabet Mafia. I immediately called one of my good friends who is a well-known local drag queen and asked him if he knew anyone in need of a special occasion gown. I offered special consultations, complete with bra fittings, during the daytime hours I worked. The first day, 3 drag queens showed up. The next, it was 4. Saturday involved 5 drag queens, and a few men there for support. It may have gotten out of hand on Sunday when a whole van of drag queens drove in from over an hour away just to see me, and start a ruckus with the religious nuts in the store. I had to take half of the salons to dress them, and I made a huge amount in commission in that week. The next week, a good number of my clientele continued to come into the shop, always insisting on me and demanding I be listed as their consultant. The manager was ticked, and the other consultant was disgusted, but what could they really do? All my manager asked me to do was increase my sales, which I had done in spades. I ultimately left just a few weeks later, which was planned as I had graduated and taken a professorship at a state school some hours away. But I did learn from the assistant manager at the store that the Alphabet Mafia continued to flamboyantly frequent that store for their bridal and formal wear needs, until it ultimately closed down 6 months later. Remember to tip your waitresses, and don't ever peeve off the drag queens. After I left, 2 other consultants left as well because of the manager. The store took a major financial hit from losing a good chunk of their experienced workers all at once. One of the consultants went to work for a competitor, and it was rumored she took many of her and my clients with her. When the local newspaper ran a story that the manager was homeless and sleeping in the stockroom at the bridal shop, corporate shut the store down for financial reasons. Good job, OP. You deserved it. You pleased your friends and got money for it, as well as getting back at your colleague. One of my longtime friends run a bridal salon, and every time I see her, she thanks me for sending her so many of my friends as clients. I guess I'm helping friends on both sides of the deal, and making this world a better place. Haha, these people, your cohort, are so fixated on their narrow worldview being the only right way that they'll literally burn down their own business to support it. Too many people feel uncomfortable with different thoughts, and as a result become stubborn, instead of truly trying to understand and accept. The only thing I don't understand is the sales structure. For the commission you didn't get, you weren't there, someone else was, but somehow you were supposed to get a commission instead of the person who actually made the sale? Why is that? Seems strange. The second story is, don't send emails outside of work? Sure. Backstory. Some of our field agents in my company were taken off the road on full pay during COVID, but expected to be available for retraining, etc., in anticipation of a return to work. At the beginning of last month, I started scheduling training for agents to return to the field. Pre-COVID, these agents worked 11 to 7 shift, and I usually worked business hours. There at times, I'd be around from 7 a.m. or doing something at 9 in the evening, though, and generally would respond to an email if I felt it warranted one at that time. During COVID and retraining, agents were asked to be available during business hours, instead of these trainings and not their usual shift. Everyone seemed happy enough to do this upon request. One agent, who can be a serial complainer at the best of times, started whining that he was getting emails outside of his work times, i.e. 9 or 10 a.m. instead of 11 a.m. Now, I usually send invites to training, etc., or handouts whenever I get a free second, which could be 8 a.m. or 8 p.m., depending on if I'm tied up in training sessions or meetings. No agent is obligated to check and or respond to anything outside of their work hours, however. It's more so it's in their inbox when they log on. A Teams invite went out about 9 a.m. for a training exercise 2 days later, as I wanted to keep scheduling ahead of myself and give the guys as much notice as I could. Serial complainer went to HR and said he has a right to disconnect. HR explained that he was under no obligation to read or reply to any of these emails, as his shift was 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Remember, the shift is actually 11 a.m., but all agents were happy to work to a different schedule during training and finish at 5 p.m. instead. HR requested that this agent not receive emails outside of their contract hours, due to their complaint and right to disconnect. I said sure, no problem. QMC. I sent an email out at 9 p.m. 2 days later with some new information about some of the products that was due to be added the next day. This had only come via the client about an hour before. Agents were all now back to the 11 a.m. shift, and I wanted to have the information as soon as possible, as I had AL booked for the next day. I had left Serial Complainer out, as per his request, and had scheduled his email to send at 11 a.m. Serial Complainer then sent an email to me after receiving the email, whinging that he hadn't been given adequate notice of the new information. My out of office was on as I was AL. Serial Complainer then called my work mobile and left a voicemail asking me to run through the product set with him. I didn't have my work phone on as, AL. I was then sent another email from him, where he stated he was not informed of the products the same time as his colleagues, and was being put at a disadvantage and being discriminated against, and complained that I unavailable to explain what he needed to know, which was unacceptable. I saw this email the next day, after I returned from AL, and I replied at 11 a.m. stating that I'm not obliged to respond to emails outside my work hours, under the right to disconnect, and CC'd HR. I then emailed HR separately and brought up that Serial Complainer was suffering from a case of the old double standards. Everyone but Serial Complainer receives emails outside of work hours now, and every time Serial Complainer sends one outside of someone else's work hours, they don't respond until their shift starts. We all have I may send this email at a time that is of convenience to me. Please note you're not obliged to respond outside of work hours. Serial Complainer is not happy, but rules is rules. It's the Serial Complainer's own fault that he didn't get a letter from you. He didn't want to get them during off hours, so you get what you want. And in general, for the future, I want to tell you that you need to set clear and defined boundaries, just to avoid this mess. Certain business hours that you're available. By not setting clear boundaries, you just turn it into a gray area. If you have company phones, just don't carry them after hours. If you use a personal phone, just set up a work profile with Do Not Disturb settings turned on. How can anyone expect not to get a single email from anyone, according to their random work hours? And if the company wants you to read emails outside of work, let it pay you to do so. I work as a teacher, but my salary isn't enough for me to check letters outside of work hours. It's stressful enough during the day to worry about what kind of mess is going on. I don't want to ruin my evenings and weekends. I have a family. Emails outside of work hours I don't mind, as long as I respond to them during work hours. The last story is a colleague's way to deal with excessive number of roll calls. Background: in certain countries, there's mandatory military service requirement, and I happen to be a citizen of one such country. However, in my country, you don't necessarily end up in active duty, as there are multiple ways. Other than being physically unable to do so, there are certain criteria for that, to end up in what's called substitute military service. People doing substitute military service basically work a public servant job, except that unless they're in substitute military service because of family circumstances, they're required to live in a government-provided lodging. I'm currently serving substitute military service, and this is one of my colleagues' tales. Roll calls. So because we're technically doing military service, there are laws that govern us. We also have facility-based rules that govern us. Between the two sets of rules, this ends up being the case. If Monday is a workday, there are roll calls 1. Sunday at 9 p.m., 2. Monday at 6:30 a.m., and 3. Monday at 8 a.m. We're also forbidden to leave the facility between 9 p.m. and 6:30 a.m. 1 and 2 are done by the on-duty officer, whereas 3 is performed by our HR supervisor. Now, the 2 roll call is not always done. Some officers don't care, I think, whereas our HR supervisor, who can and is sometimes the on-duty officer, probably doesn't want to do that many himself in a short span. Again, I think. We have previously requested to the management that if it's possible to eliminate the 2 roll call altogether, and we were told that the 2 and 3 roll calls serve different purposes. The 3 roll call is more like us clocking in, whereas the 2 roll call is to ensure that we didn't do anything stupid during the night. So they will not eliminate the 2 roll call. Time off policy. Because of what my facility does, we're always required to have someone on site among the people doing substitute military service, even during off-work times. We do 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. days Monday through Friday, so if we were to work a specific weekend, we would then get 2 days accrued as vacation days, which we then ask to take off. The same thing is true if we get called to work nights or overtime, though those are usually given in 30-minute increments. We then ask for time off, signed by our supervisors according to which division we're under. Now the policy is written that if a person would take the morning off, they're not only to report at 1 p.m., or if a person would take the afternoon off, they're able to depart at noon, as noon to 1 p.m. is assumed to be our lunch break. The first part translates into, if I take the morning off, I skip all 3 roll calls as I am on vacation until 1 p.m. The MC. My colleague, who's renting a place with his girlfriend relatively close by, because she's a student at a nearby college, decides that since there are just too many roll calls, he would just spread his vacation days off into 1 or 2 hour blocks. For instance, he's taking 8 to 10 a.m. off Monday through Thursday this week. By doing this, he claims that because he's on vacation until 9 or 10 a.m. each day, he rightfully doesn't have to participate in any roll calls. He's turning 8 hours of vacation into way more than that to spend with the girlfriend. I actually don't think the policy will be changed, mostly because we aren't getting enough replacements. Your institution rejected your request to reduce the number of roll calls each day, so your colleague missed all the pre-calls. That was obvious. I don't see how roll call would prevent stupidity. My buddy had a similar story with days off at the end of the service. He had about 30 plus days, and just used them all at the end. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.